Blood in the water. The chat room was a dingy, low-level hole with watered-down drinks and a menu that consisted solely of deep-fried calories that would get you through the night if your stomach could handle them. The two things it offered was a solid net connection service and anonymity, which was why Johnny Denton was sitting in one of the rear room booths, a glass of turpentine in one hand and his hard case machine open on the tabletop in front of him. He'd been jacked in for hours, digging into the DrekNet and trying to find some answers. It had all started 72 hours ago. A club called Bounce got lit up just as it was closing up. There were a dozen bodies on the floor, most of them belonging to the Canyon Kings. One of them wasn't, though. Nobody was sure what Detective Harold Vash from Vice had been doing in the back room of that club, surrounded by gangers who were all washing their dirty credits, but he'd been gunned down right alongside them. That sort of thing was a hazard of the job when you worked on that beat, and in isolation, it probably would have been swept under the rug, written off as a tragedy. Then it happened again. 4 hours later, there were reports of heavy weapons exchanges, explosions, and fires in the 37th block. The first security team on site found the remains of a war zone fought in a drug den. The Tunnel Vipers, a gang who ran product all over that district, had been wiped out and their operation torched. More importantly, though, the responders found Gutierrez, Stark, and Boskowitz. All three of the Vice cops were dead, their heads blown clear off their shoulders and splattered across the walls. Crime scene personnel had to use the corpses' fingerprints and DNA to make a positive ID on them. In the past 60-some-odd hours, there had been at least 10 more confirmed incidents, as they were being called. They were all over the gutters, with no obvious rhyme or reason to them. Drug labs, money launderers, gun runners, hitmen, blackmailers. It was like somebody was running down a list of the worst scum in the district and cleaning house with strict prejudice. The only other through line for these hits seemed to be that every single site had at least one member of security services personnel dead in the mix, most of them attached to either Vice or to gang units. One such incident might be chance. Two could be coincidence. This many of them in this short a period of time, though, and even Denton was catching a whiff that something was up. So he jacked into the lower end of the network and started raking the muck to see what he could find. He started off with the usual places first. Hogwatch had some choice things to say about the dead personnel found on scene, but between the users dragging their name through the mud, there was a lot of speculation about handshake agreements and kickbacks between the gangs and the security squads who were supposed to be trying to put a stop to their operations. Supposed to being the key phrase. Tagsy pointed out that a lot of gang tags on the surrounding block had been crossed off in white paint, the color making sure that everyone could see it. Nobody knew if this was just the taggers updating the street score, or if the triggerman was sending a message to anyone who got their updates off the city walls. There were also reports of angel wings and death's heads found in the same white paint, but again, nobody could say if it was the shooter making themselves known, or just the block artists trying to fill a gap by putting a symbol onto the nameless, faceless killer. There were other places he checked, of course. Denton might work behind a desk these days, but he had a trick or two in his back pocket, and he had managed to find his share of hidden corners on the Drek. He checked in with the gun running boards, seeing if anyone had noticed a client with a particular need for military munitions. No dice. He slipped onto the corner of the network where street soldiers went to try and negotiate terms to try to save on collateral damage, but they didn't have any more clue than the security services did about what was happening and who was responsible for it. He even went into the darker corners of the voyeur rooms, seeing if anyone was promising vids about what was going down. A lot of people were looking, it seemed, but judging from the comments, nobody was offering the genuine article. Denton spent hours dragging the network, making anonymous posts and setting up basic bots to watch for replies, hoping that someone out there knew more than he did. He was well into his third glass, and the connection between his brain and his artificial arm was just starting to get hazy when an alert went off on his screen. It wasn't for any of the programs he'd set up, though. It was something else. Code black, Denton said through half-numbed lips, his brow creasing. Offices down at Lower Pike Street. Shots fired. EMS and fire response on the scene. Denton set his glass down and tapped a few keys to bring up the data scroll. His eyes slid back and forth over the messages, seeing who called it in, how fast the response time was, and what security footage existed to date. There was nothing. Then, one of the traps he'd set up pinged him. There was a fresh post about the incident already, it seemed. He was about to log off the network and pack it in when Denton saw the pics. Silhouetted against a neon splash was a shadowy figure, and even though the details were grainy, he could see that whoever it was, they'd come loaded for bear. Tactical body armor, cross-braced ammo rigs, all of it blacked out and bearing no markings. This wasn't some gangland headhunter looking to make a statement. This guy was something else. A real, genuine spook who was planting himself a field of gravestones. Denton leaned back in his seat, raising his glass to his lips as he looked at the image. "Looks like we found our avenging angel," Denton muttered as he tossed back the rest of his drink, baring his teeth at the burn of the cheap alcohol. The real question is, just who in the hell are you? Thanks for sticking to the end of this cyberpunk story. Blood in the Water is the second tale in this gritty, gangland mystery, following up from Ordered Arms. This story is the introductory tale to the tabletop RPG supplement 100 Resources and Rumors to find on the DrekNet, and it provides all sorts of unique things for your deckers and netrunners to come across when they're jacked in to the more dangerous parts of the network. If you want to help support us and keep the channel going, then please like the video, share it around, and subscribe to us. And, if you really want to go the extra mile, consider picking up a copy of one of the RPG supplements linked in the video description below.